Hello everyone, welcome to Rational Science, and this site deals with physics. So if you're not interested in physics, you are in the wrong site. Today we are going to be dealing with this issue. Okay, let's get right to it. If I can get it up here. Why is there something rather than nothing? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Well, some people say everybody should ask themselves that question, and the question is whether everyone has. Not everybody seems to be asking that question. Anyways, I looked up on the internet several people who attempted to answer that question, and today we're going to listen to their voices. Okay, here's one fellow. His name is Gura, and he's got 1 million followers. And typically when there's 1 million followers, you know something is wrong. Wrong because the majority of people are religious people. And they don't understand anything about anything. And they just follow gurus like this gentleman here. Okay, what does he say about this question? He says, this is what nothing looks like. Okay? First he's going to define nothing for us, or give us a notion of what nothing is in his mind, right? Not some imaginary nothing, but actual nothing. I like that because actual is a synonym of real, of exist. And he's going to talk about nothing that exists. Okay, and that's what happens. As you can see, you're going to see that the problem here is that he doesn't define his terms. That's going to be the problem. It says, but actual nothing. Actual nothing has colors. Actual nothing talks. Actual nothing hears, and actual nothing is a bird flying through the air. Actual nothing is indistinguishable from something. Everything is nothing. That's like when people say God is everything. And that means God is really nothing because they haven't understood squat. You know, if God is everything, what is God? In fact, God is also nothing. That means God becomes a meaningless word. That's what's going to happen with this fellow. He says you have to visualize, or you have to imagine, okay, nothing as a black hole, as a black void. But he says, or he adds to that, he says, but even a black void is something, okay? He continues, says, what reality is purely unbiased, unrestricted, unlimited consciousness. And every time I hear the word consciousness, I know I'm dealing with a religious individual, a spiritualist, okay? In other words, a person who has no clue about anything. You're conscious, you are conscious now. That's what reality is made of. So he thinks that reality, existence, has to do with what you personally perceive. In other words, we always have that issue in ordinary speech when we say that whatever you think is real, that's what's real to you. And so that's the notion of ordinary speech of the people out there on the streets. It's not a scientific notion of what reality or what exists means. And that's where the problem is, not defining what exist is, what reality is, and just using the word from ordinary speech and says, hey, whatever's real to you is real. And no, that can't be true, because that's, first of all, it's subjective. Then if you're high on drugs or whatever, whatever hallucinations you have, that's not real out here. That's not real to all of us. What's real is what's subjective, what everybody sees, not what one guy sees. That's not real. Okay, if you see ghosts, you might say, well, that's my reality. Well, no, then you can't use the word reality in science like that. In ordinary speech, you can say whatever you want. You can say that love exists. In science, you can't do that. Okay, he says, you're conscious now. That's what reality is made of. The substance of reality is consciousness. Consciousness is what? Nothing. We learned a lot. Oh, man. See, all these guys talk about poetry, essentially. And that's, let's see if I can get this thing here. Give me a second here. Get myself organized. What's real to one person is not objective, it's subjective. And the big problem here is that he's not defining his terms. Okay, so keep those things in mind. We're going to go forward. And this is what this fellow says, continues, or tries to say here. This is his vision of reality, of how he sees the universe, or nothing and something. In fact, the present moment and the entire universe and all of reality is nothing. What sense does that statement make? I mean, obviously he's reciting poetry here. He's playing with words, mumble jumble. That's all it is. No when, no where, and no how. He says it's an illusion, all that, okay? And this is why science and the human mind and the human intellect and rationality and logic struggle so much to answer metaphysical questions such as why there is something rather than nothing. Yeah, they struggle because, like this fellow, he doesn't define his terms. That's why they struggle, because they have no clue whenever they don't define their terms, okay? And then he says, because the analytical mind, I guess he's got a problem with the analytical mind, with a rational mind. He'd rather be irrational, okay? That's fine, that's his choice. The analytical mind only works based upon certain premises and certain assumptions and certain fundamental distinctions, like the distinction between something and nothing. Well, yeah, you have to define these things in order to be able to talk sensibly. Otherwise, you talk irrationally, okay? And it means that you have a subjective religion, and yeah, you can believe in anything you want, but it doesn't mean that you've made your case, not in the realm of science. Between something existing and non-existing, between something being logical and illogical. Yeah, when you don't define these terms, you can talk about this all day long and chase your tail around, like this fellow does. And that explains why he's got 1 million followers, in great measure. But all of these are biases within consciousness. Reality can only exist. Reality exists. Existence exists. I heard that before, Ayn Rand. Precisely because it is perfectly symmetrical, whatever that means, okay, such that it cancels itself out. An infinite singularity of everything superimposed on top of itself into a perfect unity, a perfect symmetry, such that we could say that none of it even exists. Well, I hope you learned something from this fellow. He chases his tail around, he says, everything exists, nothing exists, consciousness is nothing, nothing exists, and he said nothing. But these are the fellows that, have lots of followers because they are religious fanatics. Whether they believe in God or not is irrelevant, but they're religious because first, they don't define their terms. Second, they harp on belief. That's why, on opinion, on subjectivity. That's why they're religious individuals. Okay, let's see what the fatal problems are here. Here's first set. This is the first couple problems with Leo's reasoning. Okay, subjectivity, introducing an observer. Okay. Science, we don't use observers. It's in the religion of mathematical physics where they introduce observers, and obviously is a follower of mathematical physics. He takes everything through authority, what the mathematical establishment has proven, and this is what he regurgitates to his followers. Leo talks about what you visualize when someone says nothing. Okay. He suggests black hole, black void, etc. He unjustifiably introduces consciousness. In other words, he says, well, what is reality to you? What is real to you? No, we don't care what's real to you. It's got to be real to the whole universe, to the whole planet. Okay, so if there's a wall there, or I always say, you throw a rock through a window, and you show that to everybody. You say, how did the window break? Everybody says the same thing. Well, a rock went through the window. Now that's known as objectivity in physics. Everybody saw and experienced, etc., the same thing. Okay, but he's saying, no. What did you experience? What did you see when you were on drugs or whatever? That's subjective. So this is not an issue of using senses or the mind. This is an issue of definitions. Okay? That's how we determine these things objectively. We define and just follow through with a definition. That's what it is. So we go with a definitions important in this case. What is something? What is nothing? This fellow never defined them. I mean, he says consciousness is nothing. Nothingness exists and also doesn't exist. Whatever all that meant. Okay? And so, until he defines nothing rigorously, okay, we have no idea what he's talking about. So we define it for him, something that which has shape, okay, and those are the synonyms, and nothing that which doesn't have shape. We have, these two words are antonyms, and now we can use these two terms consistently. We know what we're talking about. If it has shape, we're going to call it something. If it doesn't have shape, whatever you're pointing to nothing, okay, that's it. When you point to the moon, you point to something. And when you point to the black stuff around it, can you point to that? Well, you're not really pointing to that because you're treating that black stuff as something. Okay? And for that, first we got to define what that black stuff is. We define it as what? That which doesn't have shape. If it doesn't have shape, you're pointing to nothing. Whatever that means to you. Okay, so the moon is something. What's around it, that black stuff, that's known as nothing. Space. Space is nothing. Okay, and here's the second set of problems with Leo's reasoning. Okay, and he equates nothing with meaningless. Okay, and he went there. Let's see if I can get that back up here. He said, where was it? I think it was this one. Yeah. He said, goes through all this gibberish about, nothing has colors, nothing talks, actual nothing hears. What does all that mean? What is that nonsense? And so he's just saying that all this is meaningless, like meaningless words, and what that means to him is nothing. So that's what he's equating it to. He's not saying what nothing means for the purposes of science or physics. In other words, space, right? Vacuum. He's just saying that whatever nothing means is just meaningless, is meaningless. So when you talk about a chair, well, what meaning does a chair have? Well, it has no meaning, so that's nothing. You're pointing to nothing. That's his reasoning, if you could call it reasoning, okay? So what is meaningless is Leo's reasoning until he defines the strategic terms that make or break his arguments. Game of words, that's what it is. Circular reasoning, because he has not defined the terms in his dissertation. Okay? Then obviously he hasn't defined the key word exist, real, reality. Okay, he uses the notion of ordinary speech, and part of that is that no one in the last 10,000 years defined the word exist. Whatever you find in the dictionary are just synonyms, and I've covered that in the past. Okay, the definition of exist, what is it? Exist, physical presence. It's got to be an object, otherwise it doesn't exist. And of course this destroys a lot of religions, and there's only one solution for that, and that's you give me a definition you can use consistently for the word exist. Very simple. And no, we don't use the senses, we don't use the mind, consciousness, all that nonsense. No. We define the term exists and then use it consistently. That's the way we do it in science, in physics. So what this guy talks about is just gibberish. Okay, here's another guy. He's got twice as many followers. He's got 2 million followers. And again, you can see why they follow them, because all they do is just word wizardry. That's all they do. And here, this fellow's name is McKechnie. Okay, and something caught my eye. It says, we're the last humans left. And I said, oh, another guy who discovered that we're the last humans. No, not even by a mile. And this is what he writes as the main point. Is that we hope to enjoy the privilege of being a semicolon in history rather than a full stop. Okay? So on behalf of the 150 billion who came before us and our human cousins who didn't make it, we just hope this message finds you well, and we hope when you find us thousands of years from now. Okay? So he's not saying we have that extinction is imminent. Okay? Thousands of years from now, that we are well too. No, we won't. In fact, we won't have to wait 1,000 years from now, because extinction of our species is imminent. It's about to happen any moment now, okay? In any case, please just write back. It's dark over here, and we're the last humans left. No, we're not. What he was referring to was he went through the different hominids, and he says, look, we're the last hominids left. Okay, there's no more. Yeah, we're the last dynasty. And that gives you an idea that we can't go very far, partly because we've been around for 200,000 years. We've been inbreeding on the one hand, but more important than that, our economy is going to go south. The global economy will collapse, and that's going to be the end of all of us. No one will produce or distribute food to the cities. Okay, and that's when billions will die. And that's coming up. I think might happen this year for all we know. I mean, it's right around the corner. We're not too far away from that. Whether months or years, we're not too far away from that. Okay, I like how he starts, this fellow, Alex. Why is there something rather than nothing? He says, these are unacceptable answers, okay? God did it. Yeah, well, then what did God, he says. And I think that's a typical issue, who created God? Second, if you say, I don't care. Well, he says, yes, you do. The stuff you're made of is 13 billion years old. Where did he get that? Big Bang. Okay, and that's what these people have been brainwashed into mathematical physics, and just take all that mathematics feeds to them as real as a done deal. They never even question it. Okay, even though 13 billion years ago, what is it? Big Bang is creationism. And a lot of these guys, on the one hand, claim to be atheists, but then they talk about belief and subjectivity, meaning that they are religious individuals. They don't even realize that. Okay, and he said you should give a damn. The reality is maybe more than 80. I'd say 85% of humanity doesn't give a damn about that issue. So I think 85 would answer, well, I don't care. People have bigger problems on their hands. Where they're going to live, how they're going to make their next buck. Some people in some parts of the world, they don't even have a house or even running water. There are all kinds of people out there, and they don't enjoy all these luxuries of thinking about the universe. They've got bigger things on their mind. So if I were to run a poll, 8 billion people on the planet, I would say maybe 85% of them don't care about this issue. So he's wrong. He says you should care, yeah, but that's only when you've got your tummy filled. Okay, maybe we're just too stupid to work it out. Yeah, as far as the mathematicians, I would say, yeah, mathematical physics has never been able to work out this issue. And he says, which is what everyone says shortly before someone works something out. And he's right there, so he's getting 10 points for that one. Okay, he continues, he says there are two possibilities, okay, when you analyze this question, why is there something rather than nothing? He says, there's two answers here. Everything either came out of nothing for no reason at all, okay? Everything has always been around forever, okay? I think it's a pretty good start. I mean, at least he's in the ballpark, okay? And so this is what he proposes, okay? He proposes something like the oscillating universe, okay? He invokes time. He said, what if the universe was caused from its own future? So we have an ending to the universe, right? And then it starts all over again, like again, the oscillating universe theory, where, the end is the beginning of the next universe. The end of our universe is the beginning of the next one. Modern physics might allow for it. Oh, does it? You mean mathematical physics, not physics. But what if a property of nothing is that it makes some things? Okay, I'll talk about that in a few seconds. How can something not have a beginning? That's the universe we propose. We say that matter cannot come from absolutely empty space. And so, something can come from, does not have a beginning, or can't come from nothing, okay? And right now we don't have a clue. Not scientists, not philosophers, not theologians. We don't even know where to start. So here, this guy intends to talk about a subject which he knows nothing about. Absolutely love it. And maybe that explains why he's got 2 million followers. Okay? Yeah, because he's going to talk about something he knows nothing about. I guess people like to listen to a fellow like him and say, yeah, we're also ignorant. We don't know anything. They like to hear that, and they probably give him a like. Right. Is that why they watch this guy for him to tell them, I don't know? I mean, I really don't understand humanity in that sense. Okay, here's another fellow, a little more well-known. His name is Jim Holt. He's a writer. He wrote, I think, for the New York Times. Philosopher, newsman, okay? And he wrote a book because he dedicated some time researching this subject. Why does the world exist? And he tried to answer this question. Why is there something rather than nothing, okay? And he says, this is the super ultimate why question. Why does the universe exist? Well, right there and then we already have a problem. Universe is a concept. Concepts don't exist. And then, he says exist like he knows what he's talking about. And again, I'm sure if you look through his whole book, you won't find the definition for the word exist. Okay, he says, this is from a video he had, I think, on TED Talk. I'm going to talk about the mystery, the puzzle of existence. Oh man, I love it. Finally, someone who can answer the question. Great, let's listen. So, he starts out right. He says, it's physics that deals with existence. He hit that one on the nose. Yeah, physics belongs exclusively to physics. It does not belong to religion. So when theologians say, oh, the existence of God, or atheists talk, no, God doesn't exist. No. They've all crossed the line into physics. Whenever you use the word exist in any formal way, you've crossed the line into physics, whether you know it or not. Physics has exclusive control, property, ownership of the word exist, or anything related to existence. He starts out by mentioning Larry Krauss, who wrote, I talked about him in the past, he wrote a book, Universe from Nothing, okay? And he doesn't quote him, but he essentially summarizes what Larry thinks or says, okay? He says, the state-of-the-art physics can show how out of sheer nothingness, whatever nothingness is, because Larry also had a problem there, okay? No space, no time, no matter, nothing, okay? A little nugget of false vacuum can fluctuate into existence. Okay, tell me how. What's the mechanism, right? And then, by the miracle of inflation, this is the Alan Guth, I don't know why they call him Guth. I think it should be pronounced Guth, but, well, okay, whatever. The miracle of he created this inflation theory that shortly after the Big Bang, there was this exponential increase in whatever substance was there at the time, okay? Whatever God had created by that time, I guess, I don't know. But it comes from this, you can call it quantum foam, which is one of the things being kicked around, okay? But he says this false vacuum, quantum foam, whatever they want to call it, they use these terms. And so they have this false vacuum, and by the miracle of inflation, this exponential multiplication of that false vacuum, okay, blow up into this huge variegated cosmos we see around us, okay? Holt, he dismisses this as religion. He says, well, that's like ad hoc, like you put this false vacuum in there by hand, where did that come from? And he says, even Stephen Hawking was puzzled after giving his explanation of how the universe came to be, and kind of concluded that, you can't solve the problem of existence with equations. okay, which is totally true. Totally true. Math has nothing to do at all with this problem. So anyone who says, hey, I'm going to do this equation, this calculation to find out where the universe came from, no. It's got nothing at all to do with making something out of nothing, which is the issue before us. Okay, so whenever people say, let me bring the mathematician over, he'll tell us, and he's bringing the wrong person. He's bringing a person who has no clue what the question is, let alone the answer. Okay, so what is Jim's resolution to this problem? Okay, so this is what he resolves. This is his proposal. This is what Jim Holt proposes. He says the resolution to the mystery. Okay, hang on here. See, we have a resolution finally. 10,000 years, we finally have an answer. To the mystery of existence is that reality, and notice how many times he uses the word really, reality, and exist, okay? Although it's underlined there. And again, he's never going to define the term, so we don't know what he's talking about. That the reality we exist in is one of the generic realities, okay? And he's kind of insinuating the multiverse. There's all these universes out there, and there are all kinds of universes. He's going to say that we're kind of like in the middle of the road and not at the extremes. That's going to be his argument here. He says reality has to turn out some way. It can either turn out to be nothing, which is one extreme, a universe where there's nothing in it, okay? Or everything, in other words, completely full, okay? Or something in between, where you have half full, like, maybe our universe, we have some amount of matter. I can't even say half. A lot less than half. They say, 4% of the universe is matter, and the rest is dark matter and dark energy. Okay, so we have 96% of unknown stuff out there, black stuff that we don't know that they're looking for, and only about 4% is matter. Okay, that's their notion. And that's what he's talking about. And he says something in between. We're in that in between. So it has some special features. Okay, listen to this. Like being really elegant, or really full, or really simple, like nothingness, that would require an explanation. How can you have a universe there's nothing in it? Now he says that requires an explanation. But if it's just one of these random generic realities, the ones in between that have a little bit of matter and a bunch of nothing, then there's no further explanation for it. Oh, I love how he solved it. He says, I'm not going to answer the question because we live in a universe where that's in between. We're not in the extreme where it's all completely full, I guess a single block of matter, and the other one which is just empty space. Now we live in between in this universe that has a little bit of matter and a lot of empty space, and so we don't have to answer the question. That's his resolution, okay? And indeed, I would say that that's the reality we live in. That's what science is telling us. This has been confirmed through gravitational waves. Where did he get that? Certainly not out of a kindergarten book. No, he got that from all these relativists, the mathematicians, people who claim that there's been a big bang, okay? And that now we are seeing or feeling or hearing, I guess, the gravitational waves come from the Big Bang. And I don't know how they can distinguish the gravitational waves coming from a Big Bang, the background radiation, and the gravitational waves coming from what? Two black holes colliding? I mean, how do you distinguish those? Maybe they're confusing one with the other, The other day they got a Nobel for that, right? For saying they got gravitational waves from two black holes colliding. They didn't see the black holes colliding. They just said it must have been a big kaboom. And what else could cause it except two black holes? That's their reasoning. That's how they come up with all this stuff. They never saw a black hole in their lives. Hopefully not, because supposedly when they put their telescope there and they peer through there, what are they staring at? Some light coming from the black hole? Black hole that doesn't even allow light to come out of it, unless you have Hawking radiation, in which case it's tolerable. Okay. In other words, we have no idea. They invent loopholes to every theory, and they just keep going. So there's some evidence that this really is the reality that we're stuck in. In other words, he never answers the question. He says, because we don't have to. That's his answer. Love it. And he's an expert. He studied this subject. He wrote a book on a bestseller just to tell you we don't know. Or no, not we don't know. We don't have to answer the question. So we have this other fellow who says we don't know, and this guy says we don't have to answer the question. Love those answers, Great. Here's another fellow, a little more well-known in all of these. His name is Carroll. He's a mathematical physicist, a mathematician. He does everything with magic, just like all mathematicians. And he says you have to have the quantum mechanical laws to begin with. Okay? So that's the starting point. The starting point is not zip. The starting point is quantum mechanical laws. So we have these laws written out there. Someone legislated, I don't know, God maybe legislated these laws. And he says we have these laws we can't break. The universe can't break matter, can't break these laws. Okay, fine. How could you start in empty space or a quantum vacuum and then evolve according to the laws of physics into a universe like we see? We have plausible answers to that question. So yeah, once you start with something, he says the laws, whatever those, I mean, what are we talking about? Concepts here? Matter started from concepts. But he says from those concepts, we have plausible answers to how matter came into being from those laws. What the hell is he talking about? Well, he's talking about what you see there, quantum foam again. You know, it's these laws of quantum mechanics. He says those are unbreakable. And what is he talking about? He's talking about the uncertainty principle, maybe complementary, maybe the exclusion principle. Maybe he's talking about those laws. Okay, and it's like, you know, those are unbreakable laws according to him, and that's his starting point. So we have laws, but we have no matter. We have only laws, or like Holt is going to say, Jim Holt is going to say in another context, he's going to say, you know, it's like you have the nothing, space, whatever, and you have these laws, and when you put them together, that's when the universe starts. Okay, that's how quantum enters the origin of the universe. Okay, so he says there are physical theories that do that. I don't know about physical, maybe mathematical theories that say this is how matter comes into being from these laws and nothing. Okay, and we don't know whether any of them is right. Irrelevant. That's religion. Whether you believe they're right or wrong, that's got nothing to do with physics. Subjective against subjective. Okay, we don't have the final answer to those questions, but it doesn't seem hard. Again, and there's no insuperable obstacle. Yeah, again, these people do everything with magic. That's why they're mathematicians. Their mechanisms are all irrational. You can't imagine a single mechanism, and the main one is creating something from nothing, which is what they can't explain. That's the issue. But see, they all insist that the universe came into being, one, and then it came into being from nothing. But then they qualify that nothing because they never defined the word nothing. And what is nothing? Well, they say, oh, these quantum laws plus nothing. And where did the laws come from? Which is what he says again. You know, that this is his next point. He says, where did these laws come from? And I guess, you know, I had to put God in there by hand because I don't know where the laws came from. Who legislated? Where was the Congress? Okay. And so many people have in mind the deeper question of why is there quantum mechanics? In other words, where are these laws of physics why are there laws of physics rather than no laws of physics, no thing at all? Yeah, why are there laws? How can you have absolutely nothing and laws of physics? Like, these are the laws by which the matter, which I will create eventually, will have to abide by. I mean, who put these laws into you know, in force? Who enforces these laws? It's like you have no matter, but you have the laws. Absolute nonsense. But this is what these people believe. That's why they're religious fanatics. They're not physicists at all. Okay. The only plausible answer is why not? Now, how's that for an answer? Okay. So where do these laws come from? How can they come up from nothing? Well, why not? And again, it's up to you to believe this nonsense, this explanation, this cop-out, I guess. That's the best way to put it. Why did you ever expect there to be nothing rather than something? Okay, these are the answers they give you. It's not the kind of question in which we're ever going to get an answer that says, oh, it's because of this. Well, yeah, you're never going to answer the question because you have no answer how something came from absolute nothing. That's the problem. That's the question we're asking you to answer, and you can't answer, and you say, well, you know, we're never going to be able to answer. So what is this gibberish about the laws of quantum mechanics underlying or serving as the foundations for the matter that was created later on? It's like the laws were there, nothing was there, and then suddenly you can put anything in there, the laws will mold it and tell it how to move. And the mathematicians come, I guess, 14 billion years later and describe the motion of particles and try to figure out what happened on day one. Of course, they never get there, right? Okay, and what's interesting here, look, this is like his corollary, and you can see how many times he used the word exist also here. The brute facts, that's what mathematicians talk about. Facts, proof, prediction, you know, these are their words. The brute facts are the laws of physics, not the existence of the universe. Okay? In the sense of a derivation of the laws of physics. I think that the laws of physics, laws, you know, like legislated by God, existing, laws exist. How can laws exist? What do you mean by exist? That's a different thing than the universe existing. Oh, is it? Okay? I can't imagine the laws of physics existing without a universe existing. So he's going around in circles chasing his tail around. On the one hand, he says there's these laws. And from there sprang the universe. And by universe, I guess he means matter in space, because even space did not exist according to him and mathematical physics. So we have these laws. They're written, I don't know, some kind of laws, or they're floating in not even in space, because space doesn't exist. God doesn't exist yet, but we have the laws. And now from those laws, somehow they move the vacuum, the nothingness, which is somethingness. And from there you get the universe, whatever the universe is to him. I guess it's matter in space, matter in nothing. I mean, these people have to define these terms in order to talk, but they're chasing their tail around because they don't define what universe is, what space is, what nothing is. They don't define the word exist. They don't tell you what a thing is, what something is, what an object is. We don't have definitions for any of these terms in mathematical physics. And so they can talk all day long chasing their tail around because you have no idea what they're talking about. They jump from one subject to the other, and you can never stop. And why? Because these people are not qualified to do this kind of work. What they are is mathematicians. All they do is mathematics, equations all day long, and that's got nothing to do with the subject matter at hand. The subject matter is, how do you create something from nothing? That's the subject matter. Can you answer the question? Just say no. Don't give me this runaround for half an hour, me chasing your language around to try to figure out, what you're talking about, because you never defined your terms in a way that a rational human being can understand it. Okay, so he says the universe obeys the laws of physics. Why? So I think they come as a package. You need the universe and you need the laws, because otherwise the laws are applicable to what? To nothing. And what is nothing made out of? Nothing is made out of this vacuum foam. Okay, the laws of physics, which are hidden in there. The false vacuum. So are we talking about something or nothing? That's why you have to define these terms. These people say it's nothing, but then they say the nothing is false vacuum. It's this foam, quantum foam. That's not nothing. What is this quantum foam? Is it a something? Then don't tell me it's nothing. And again, this is the issue. There is a quantum state that exists. A state, what is it, next to New York? Or I don't know where the state is, okay? And it obeys the laws of physics. And a quantum state is the universe. There's a quantum state that evolves through time according to the laws of physics. We haven't understood squat. And you won't, because these people have no idea what they're talking about. Why? Because they've never defined their terms. Okay, final group here. Fortunately, we had three guys. They get together. Okay, and we have Neil Turok, who's a mathematician, also a mathematical physicist. We have a fellow who apparently he studied physics, but he went into philosophy of physics. And Jim Holt again. He was in several of these panels, by the way, Jim Holt. Okay, I just caught him on one of them. And this is just a summary of their talk. They had a long talk. And so it says, Alan Guth's inflation theory has been proven. First thing that they concede, or well, at least they mention that. But Neil doesn't believe it because it assumes that the spring was compressed. He likens the Big Bang as a compressed spring. Okay? And so for whatever reason, that spring popped. And, Jack in the Box came out of there. Okay? Boom! And he says, okay, so the spring came out, but he says, who compressed the spring to begin with? That's his issue. That's where he's come from. So he says, well, because whoever was the person who was handling the questions says, well, most mathematicians out there, they believe in the multiverse. And he says, well, he rolled his eyes. He said, no, not most of them. In fact, most of them have no clue. And he's proposing the oscillating universe. He says, like the other fellow, he says there's a start. When it ends, that's only the beginning of the next universe. So he likes that theory. And then he says the Big Bang didn't start, in other words, our universe did not start at the Big Bang. Well, or maybe it did, but the issue is what preceded that? Well, that another universe which ended there and then, started the new one. So the ending of one universe is the beginning of another universe, or triggers the beginning of another universe. This is what he wants to believe in, and he says most mathematicians out there, mathematicians, they have no clue, he says. That's his version, okay? And he says, we have today an advantage over people like St. Augustine, who also had this notion. Remember St. Augustine, let me read that. Advantage over St. Augustine is that today we have observations. St. Augustine didn't have that in the 4th century. And what is he talking about? Well, St. Augustine, he came up with this notion that God is outside of time. Okay, so it's really the notion of the block universe, that God is unaffected by time, that it's like he's watching all of creation simultaneously. For him, it's all in the present mode, so to speak. Okay, and it gives you an idea of people like who was it? Peter Damian. Peter Damian, one of the doctors of the Catholic Church, one of the brains of the Catholic Church, and he's a guy who wrote a book saying that God has the power. Listen to this. God has the power to restore a woman's virginity. What the? God is all powerful. I mean, you can't question that, okay? God has the power to restore a woman's virginity. And you say, how does he do that? I mean, that's kind of odd, isn't it? And Damien also borrowed on St. Augustine, the block universe. He says, God is really outside of time, and here's this universe in front of him. He sees it all in one shot. And he doesn't make mistakes. The only mistake he ever made was bgaede. But he doesn't make mistakes, so he makes the universe in one goal, one shot, okay? And so what happens? Everything just happens as he planned it or as he created it, all of time in front of him, and he doesn't make mistakes. So if a woman lost her virginity, how does he restore it? Does he take this woman, does he take back in time and erase that event where she lost her virginity? And he says, no, that's not the way it works. See, God makes the universe, that's it. The universe is there. What's done is done, what's there is there. And so how does he restore her virginity? Well, the way he does it, he says, first, from a point of view, a physical point of view, there's no question there. That's where Peter Damian spent most of his analysis. He said, look, if God made man, obviously he can do anything physical to man, among them restore a woman's, private parts back to where they were. He can do that in a future tense after the woman lost her virginity. So how does he erase the event? And it turns out that he doesn't erase the event. The event is there, but through repentance and things of that nature, okay, he blesses that person and says, okay, your virginity is restored. So it's one of those issues that God kind of pardons you or says, okay, I'm going to restore your virginity. That event, it's like think of it as it never happened, or I'm going to pardon you for whatever you did in the past. That robbery you made at the bank, it happened, but I'm going to pardon you for it. And that way he restores it morally. And then the physical part, well, nothing's outside the bounds of God's power. And so the way they do all these things, again, is looking at it as a block universe. Okay, this notion that it's all there, the future's already there. You're just kind of walking on footsteps, okay, every day of your life. It's already there. We're robots, we're cartoon characters. That's the notion these people had. And then they also want you to have free will. So, there is always that contradiction. And so people say, well, do we have free will? Because then, if the robber robbed the bank or the killer killed you, did he have free will, or did God plan it already? I mean, was this guy just walking on footsteps that he had no way to avoid because God already settled everything? So this was the issue, okay? So this fight between determinism and free will was an important issue. And these people are getting into that world as well, but the difference here, when he says they have an advantage over St. Augustine, is that they're not only bringing observation, they're also bringing equations, saying, oh, but we have the equations. We have proof. We can prove our theories, because here's the equation, something Augustine did not have. Okay, that's the way they look at it. So they vouch for the universe, but if the universe exists as a block, then what is this nonsense about a Big Bang? It's like the whole block is there. Did the block come into being in one shot? So they have these contradictions where on the one hand they have a little dot called a singularity from where everything sprang, okay? And then on the other hand, they also say, well, the future already exists because we have the block universe invented by Mr. Augustine, apparently. I don't know if there was someone before him. And so which is it? Do we have a block universe that we can't escape because the future's already there and we're just walking on footsteps? Or are we talking about something that is expanding in front of our eyes, the universe, like the Big Bang is still exploding, okay? Which is it? We have contradictions in the notions these people have. And obviously both of them are irrational, no matter how you look at it. So this notion of Big Bang exploding and we're in the middle of the explosion, and the fact that the future already exists and we have the block universe, both are nonsense. Both are idiocy invented by mathematicians. And it wasn't even invented by them. As you can see, it comes from people like St. Augustine, who did it with God. What he did to just put God outside of the whole shebang. That's what it was. Okay, and these people say, well, let's get rid of God altogether. We don't need God, and we'll just use the universe. But they've got the same block universe. That's where the problem is. And he asks, this is Neil Turok, he says, what is dark energy and how does the Higgs fit into the scheme, into that scheme? Yeah, we got a problem because they invent all these particles like the Higgs, the C of mass particles, the particles of a concept, particles of mass, okay? And how do you fit that within dark energy, which is the so-called medium, for lack of the spirit, that is pushing everything against the gravitational pull. That's why the universe is expanding. So, I mean, they don't know how to fit all these things together. It's like this guy comes up here and says, oh, I found the Higgs. They get us a Nobel for that. The other guy says, I found Big Bang or dark energy. Okay, you get a Nobel for that. Then, how does it all fit together? Do they have, I mean, if the guy's got a Nobel here and I've got a Nobel there, that means they proved to their community, within each realm. Now, how do we put it together? Can we make sense of the Higgs together with dark energy? The answer is obviously not. It's like, just give me my Nobel and let someone else worry about that problem. But he says the universe is telling us that it is astonishingly simple. Yeah, there's a single thread. That's all there is. It's always been there. Okay? That's how simple it is. The rope is the simplest thing that you can imagine for light, for gravity, for everything. So yeah, we have a simple universe. It's the mathematicians who made it complicated. But it turns out this is Neil Turok's conclusion in that discussion. The majority of the theoretical physics community are very confused. No doubt. I don't doubt that for a minute. I think he's right on that one. I think they have no clue whatsoever and never had in the last 400 years. Why? Because they're not even following the scientific method. Whatever they had was the religious method. They were worried more about proving, and doing equations than about understanding how this universe works, mechanistically, okay, mechanically. Okay, so here are my conclusions. These individuals. The debates and dissertations have no meaning until they define the strategic words that make or break their arguments. That's how simple it is. That's where it starts. They are running around in circles. Math can't solve the problem of the origin of matter. So please keep your math to yourself, your equation to yourself. Don't bring them into the subject, into the discussion, because they have no bearing whatsoever on this topic. Creation of something from nothing, I need the mechanism. Okay, and here's the issue, okay? I illustrate it so that people know what I'm talking about. Here's God creating matter for the first time. Can God do it? I mean, God's all powerful, right? So I challenge God to do it. This is what God has to do, okay? Here we have the movie of the universe, okay, or of time, or whatever you want to say, and God is outside of it, fine, great. I want to know how God goes from frame 544, from frame 543 to 544. I want to know how in one cross-section of time, one frame of the universal film or heavenly film, how we have nothing, and suddenly in the next frame we have something in zero time, because each one of those frames represents the, you can say, the shortest length of time. Okay, so you can cut that down as far as you want, as infinitesimally small as much as you can imagine. How does God go from frame 33 to 34, from 43 to 44? That's the only question anyone has to answer. Okay, so that's the issue before us. Not even God can do that because we cannot even imagine it. And what God would have to do is explain the mechanism, how he goes from zip, absolutely nothing, no vacuum foam, or quantum foam, no false vacuum, nothing at all, zip. What is zip? That which has no shape. We want to know how he goes from that which has no shape to that which has shape, from that which has no shape to length, width, and height, from that which has no shape to form. That's the question people have to answer. And if you cannot imagine a mechanism, it's an irrational issue. It can't happen. It's just as simple as that. You can't say, well, it did happen because here's the Big Bang, and we proved it, and blah, blah, blah. No. I don't care about the Big Bang. I don't care about the equations. I don't care about running the film backwards of the exploding universe. None of that proves that the universe started from zero, meaning, and again, the question is whether they're talking about space being created, nothing being, how do you create nothing, or matter. Which one are we talking about? Are we talking about how matter came into existence or how space came into existence? Because if space is absolutely nothing, that which has no shape, what was there before there was nothing? Something? We only have something and nothing. Okay? There is no third possibility. And so if you start from absolute nothing, that which has no shape, the only issue is how do you create shape from that? And as you can see, not even God can do it. And then the question is irrational anyway. Why? Because why implies a creator. It's already embodied in the question. When you say why, this why It's not talking about cause. It's talking about reason, purpose. Okay? And here, let me put it in a little more graphic mode, a little illustration here. Okay? This is the issue. We have science. What is science? Science is rational explanations. That's what science is about. Science is divided into two branches, only two branches, philosophy and physics. Physics deals with objects, causes, and mechanisms, and philosophy deals with concepts, reasons, and purpose. And so when you say why, in this context, you're invoking a question of philosophy. You're saying reason and purpose. Okay? Why is there something rather than nothing? And it turns out you're using a question of philosophy, of the branch of philosophy, and you're introducing it into a context of physics. That's like the same thing as asking, why are there three dimensions? Why is the speed of light 300,000 kilometers per second? And so you're asking, what is the reason? What is the purpose? In other words, why did God do it that way? That's what you're asking. You're implying an intelligence automatically. It's embodied in the question. Okay? You're not asking for a mechanism. You're asking for what was the purpose? What is the reason? Okay? And the reason is always the same. Because God says so, God wanted it so. And that's why the speed of light is 300,000 kilometers per second, because God said so. That's the answer to that. It just is. There is no answer to why it's 300,000 kilometers per second precisely, any more than the mass of the electron or the proton or any of those constants. The issue here is another one. The issue is you have to ask, why is it constant? Now that's an interesting question. Why is it constant? Well, because it's a rope. It's mediated by a rope. That's why the speed of light is a constant. Then you can answer the question. But when you say, why is space black? Well, because space is nothing. And what is nothing? That which has no shape. It's the contrast to objects. Okay, that's why space is black. Because God said so. It just is so. And so there are no answers to such questions. Because the question is irrational. You're asking a question of reason and purpose. You're saying there was an intelligence that deliberately, for some purpose and some reason, because he had a headache or whatever, decided to do something in such a way. That's what the person is asking. That's the answer to that question. Okay, here's a corollary to that. Okay, and relativists have repackaged St. Augustine's block universe under the guise of science. Okay? They call themselves atheists, but make no mistake, they are religious fanatics who try to rationalize their arguments using not scripture anymore, but math as authority. It is spiritualists who have always held the reins of science and who also ended up owning them. Even today, the people who are in charge of mathematical physics are all religious fanatics. They're not rational individuals. They're not people who do things objectively. They do it completely subjective, and they're what do I want to say here? Their intention is to prove, to convince you, to persuade you, especially through authority, not to give you an objective mechanism of something that happened. Okay, so this is where the problem is. And so, and it's these type of people that ended up, in charge of mathematical physics, which is equated to science. And so the few people on the planet who still care about these things, they say, oh, I'm going to follow so-and-so because he's the scientist. He's the mathematician. He knows all these equations. If he doesn't know, who does? He's so intelligent. And no, they're the wrong people, because they're the same as the pastors of old or the priests of old, these theologians of the Dark Ages. Who interpreted the Bible for you. And these guys are the same thing. You're relying on them to tell you how to think. Because you give them the authority. You say, well, this guy has authority because look all the math he knows. So what? What does math have to do with anything? Okay? And since by far most humans are spiritualists, the extinction of man catches most, which is coming down the road, okay, catches most people blindly following these mathematical gurus. And that explains why the first two fellows have so many millions of followers, because people are suckers for that kind of double talk, that circular talk. They love it. I guess they love the poetry, and that's why they're entertained by it. I have no idea. You figure it out.